the vision of the scientific method is great because it's very optimistic. If you have a problem, you can make progress on it. So if you see yourself as a scientist in everyday life, no different from any other scientist, of course you have a lot to learn, just as science is an infinite kind of learning process. And if you are seeing yourself that way, then you become an infinite learning process.
My name is Jesse, and I'm here with my friends talking about a book that they've written. Actually, I've been friends with Andy for a couple of years now. So Andy Plotkin is a professor at Palm Beach State College, and he runs the Human Development Group. And so that's how we met. And so I'm going to go ahead and Andy, go ahead and introduce the rest of the authors. And
sure, okay. So let's see. So Bernie Phillips is the principal author of the book, which is Creating Life Before Death. You know, if you can see that here. Is it backwards? Is it frontwards? Anyways, so that's our book in which we attempt to try to show people how they can develop themselves in terms of their intellectual abilities, as well as their emotional capacities and problem solving capacities. Bernie is the principal author of this book. Neil is the co-author, along with two others who are not with us right now.
One of them is you.
Yeah, and one of them is me, of course. But based on the book, I think this is the important thing. Based on the book, is that we have established a group to consult with different groups and individuals to show them how they can develop themselves and basically take evolution into their own hands and not let social forces or psychological forces, cultural forces rule them, you know, constantly. And so take those forces into their own hands and develop themselves. You have a lot of students, I think, who want to start their own businesses. So in addition to learning about all the different functions that they have to go through with respect to government, banking, marketing, and so on, that they also need to look inward and develop themselves at the same time as they're learning these skills. So with that, we've formed WorldVision Solutions, the consulting group that I just mentioned. Sergio is with us here too, and he's the CEO of this consulting group. Bernie, you want to say a few words? And then Neil.
Okay, well, can you hear me? Bernie Phillips is my name. And I've been around for a while. I'm long in the tooth. I was Andy's professor at Boston University many years ago. And Andy got his doctorate there. And so we formed a relationship right then and there. The key thing about this, what we've done, we've been together on this project for like 7 years now. It's quite a while.
Maybe 8.
Maybe 8. Well,
I think it took us 6 years to write the book, about a year to find a publisher, a decent publisher, and then another year beyond that to establish the consulting group.
If I can say just one thing about what we've tried to do is we've developed a vision, which is very far out, but we think that everyone can move toward it. And the vision is simply the idea that every single human being has infinite potential to develop with no limit. And we believe that, and we're trying to apply it to ourselves. We have been doing that for these many years. That's what our book is about. The subtitle is Discover Your Amazing Self. We're convinced, based on the academic knowledge that we've pulled together, we've integrated knowledge. That's the difference between what we're doing and what we've looked around and seen other people doing. Because the social sciences have moved in very specialized directions. There are 52 sections separate of the American Sociological Association. The same thing is true in all the other social sciences. And that's fine. Specialization is fine if it's integrated. That's the problem. It's not. So that's what we've been doing. And we think it's important. And it can lead to, well, mainly an evolutionary self-image, which is a structure, which is something that would lead the individual to continue to develop with no limit. So that's my introduction.
Yeah, Neil?
Hi, everybody. I'm very glad to be here. I've been working with Bernie and Andy for most of those 8 years, and it's been a privilege, and it's been a tremendous learning experience for me, too. And it has opened my ability to see beyond where I am at this point to what I can be and to what everyone can be. And that's an attitude that has helped me grow and has shown me the potential for how everyone else can grow by having an attitude like that. Instead of putting myself down, pick myself up and see where I can go. And it's not always easy to get there, but having that vision, I think, is the most important part of it all.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. I think the vision that I've come to understand from Andy and his group that he runs, the Human Development Group, and also from the book and some of the passages that I've read, it's very interdisciplinary. There was a quote from, I think, Francis Bacon that said something like, "All knowledge is my province," or something like that. What's the quote for that, Andy?
I
Yeah, go
think
ahead, Bernie. Yeah, go ahead.
I take all knowledge to be my province.
That's it. Yeah. I take all knowledge to be my province. I thought that was a beautiful quote, and that kind of summarizes your group, because you guys come from a pretty diverse background. Neil, you're in mathematics, and
Right.
And what's the background in some of the others? I know Tom Savage has a really unique background as well.
Tom's background, he was a minister in the University of Wisconsin for 23 years, and then he came down to Sarasota, and he was a minister here, and then he decided to join the police department. A very strange mixture of backgrounds, but because he wanted to get things done on the street, and he rose to the rank of lieutenant. But the most important thing maybe that he did was he started community policing. In other words, getting ordinary citizens into police cars. There's a lot of opposition among the police because they felt they might become vigilantes. But no, that all they did would be to report crimes. They would not do anything. And then the idea took hold. There were 10,000 people who were working at that here in the Sarasota area. And then the idea spread all over the country.
That's very cool to have had him be such a part of that and have so much impact there. And that's really what I'm trying to get across with the Compounding Interest podcast, is that little things that we do and little ideas that we act on can cascade into much bigger projects and much bigger things. I mean, when he first started that, you have to wonder if he thought that 10,000 people or many more beyond that would be able to get involved. And so it's really tremendous on the back end what a bit of effort on the front end can do. And so that's one of the things when I talk about entrepreneurship, that's one of the things that I think we need more entrepreneurs for, is because there's many problems in our society, and there's ways of solving those problems that can be profitable. And that's where entrepreneurs especially can rise to the challenge, is where there's things that aren't being done that should be done. And by taking action, they can uplift themselves, uplift their communities, do all sorts of positive things. It doesn't have to be just about the big business, making money. And I think the measure of this is mentioned in the book, the measure of just looking at things like GNP or GDP, that's the wrong way to look at growth. That's the wrong way to look at advancing. And so there's a few other things I wanted to mention. What's the Medici effect? Maybe you guys can jump in with what you mean by that.
Bernie.
What's the question?
The Medici
The
effect.
Medici effect.
Yeah, the Medici effect. I think that has to do. I think that had to do with being eclectic and having an interdisciplinary background. But I'll let you elaborate.
Well, actually, Neil could do a better job on that, because he was the one who emphasized that to me. But I can say just a little bit about it. The Medici effect goes back to the Renaissance, when the Medici family invited poets and architects and artists and painters of all kinds to Florence. And the Medici effect was just learning from other people. Social interaction was the key idea.
And the point is that they did it in a way that gave the artists freedom to do things their way, instead of having the people at the top controlling everything. You got to do this, you got to do that. They said, no, feel free. Go ahead and do your own thing any way you want. And that encouraged the people tremendously. And I mentioned to Bernie how I thought there's a man in Hollywood that did the same thing, and we had named Arthur Freed, and because he did that, we had a period of MGM musicals that for 20 years, from the 40s to almost 30 years of musical works that were fantastic, because he gave all the people the freedom to do it their way, and he opened it up to them. And we had so many wonderful musicals developed during that period, because Arthur Freed gave all the people the freedom to do what they wanted and express it.
Very cool. Yeah, and actually, this is the perfect opportunity, I think, to bring in another voice to this chorus. And he's someone who has been a partner in crime for me whenever I'm up to some mischief. We come from very different backgrounds, but have, I think, a lot of similar ideas about how we like to, push back against just the mundane and be in silos. So I come from a math background. Liam comes from an English background, and Liam, you've been a member of the Human Development Group for a long time too. Why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and whatever you want to share.
I'm mainly just a fanboy here because I was invited by Andy to participate. So I'm not an author of the book. So I'm just here to enjoy the conversation. In regards to the Renaissance, though, and the Medici effect, I'm very much in tune with that. I'm very much in tune with the sort of subversive elements of that, where the things that fired the Renaissance were not really what we think they were. They were actually their Hermetic traditions and things like that. So So yeah, this piques my interest as far as that being mentioned in your book.
No, thank you. One of the effects of Medici was democratic movement. So interaction leads to more democracy. The way the society is generally structured today is it does not encourage interaction between people who have different roles within organizations, and it certainly doesn't encourage interaction with the people who are bosses, who are basically telling us what to do through their rigid rules and regulations. So the more interaction, the more democratic your organization can be.
Yeah, we can contrast that with the Trump approach, where it's an autocrat giving everything from the top down, and you just have to bow your head or kiss his ring and follow what he does. So that's a contrast to the Medici approach.
If I can push in here and give another example, this is Bernie talking. Most recently, and this is by most recently, I mean just the last few days, Tom put forward to me a new idea for what we can do. He, of course, has been a Unitarian pastor for many years. And what he thought of was something really concrete, not simply the idea of working with big corporations and helping them, but working with homeless people. The problem of homelessness has really never been solved. Because why? Well, our idea is that just as there is so much specialization without the integration of knowledge in the academic world, in terms of social science is what I'm talking about, in the same way, the same thing holds in society. There are many separate organizations that try to deal with homelessness, but somehow they haven't succeeded. Why? Well, he had an idea of what we could do. His idea was this: communicate with all of the churches, synagogues, and mosques in a given community, and ask each one to focus on helping one family, one that needs help, one homeless family, and work with them, use the resources of the congregation, which are substantial, and over time, you will need perhaps educational help or vocational help. You might need psychological help. You might, of course, need housing, all kinds of help. But just to focus on one particular family or individual who's homeless. And if you can do that successfully, then you can move out from church organizations or synagogues to business organizations, because you've demonstrated that you can really solve a problem. And then you can move out beyond that, from that community to other communities, as you would have given a model of what really works. So this is an example of where we might be going ourselves in the near future.
So on the question of poverty, what do you, as sociologists, what would you want to communicate to the general public about that topic, or at least as people who are familiar with sociology, for those who aren't sociologists, what would you want to communicate regarding the issue of poverty?
Well, my notion is just, if it is true, as we really believe and are convinced based on what we know, that every single human being has this extraordinary potential, then in addition to helping people in poverty financially, and that's important, certainly, I'm not getting away from that, but in addition, the whole idea of helping them to get self-esteem, self-confidence, the motivation that they need that desperately. Let me give an example of what I'm working with myself when I lose confidence, and I do every once in a while, no question. One of the concepts that we work with is the power of language. And in particular, within language, there is the idea of gradation, matters of degree, one step at a time, and so on. So normally, I would think not so gradationally, but dichotomously, either or. Have I made it? Have I done my task, or have I failed? And when I emphasize dichotomy, it's easy to get discouraged. No, I haven't done it. My God, I'm terrible. I'm no good. But if I move toward gradation, then I can learn from my failure. And I can realize, hey, it takes time to accomplish things. So the gradational idea plus the dichotomy, I'm not saying dichotomy is not good. It is good, but it has to be put together with gradation. So that's an example of the kinds of ideas that we've been working with.
And too many people think in dichotomous terms. Mostly, I shouldn't say only, but mostly. So you're down here and you want to get up here, and it's very difficult. So one solution is do it a step at a time. Tell yourself, okay, what's the next goal up, and then the next goal, and so on. Pretty soon, you can actually get to where you want to be. Yeah. So that's a science. That's basically the heart of the scientific method. And it's embedded in the language, but it's invisible because we don't think about it. We're unconscious to it most of the time. So our book hopefully helps people to unveil some of these invisible forces that they not aware of, that they can tap into and develop themselves and their businesses.
If I can add one thing, another concept from language is metaphor. Now, metaphor is just a way of tying something that is concrete and visible to something that is invisible. So, for example, we have this invisible idea of continuing development, personal evolution with no limit. Okay, beautiful idea, but unless it's tied to something visible, you can't get there. And so you lose it, you lose confidence in it. But suppose you learn, and this is what we're trying to do and teach others, suppose you learn to tie more and more the things you do, like, for example, this conference. That's something concrete, but can we link it to our own general evolution, personal continuing development? Well, normally we don't think that way. Well, good conference, nice, I'm glad I had it. Now I'm doing something else, etc. So it doesn't stay with us. But what could stay with us is that vision. We could tie it to more and more the things we do in everyday life. And so the vision becomes a habit, a structure. That's what we're pointing toward. And then it becomes part of your self-image, and you gain in confidence, and it stays with you. It's a habit. That better?
That's
Cool.
that's a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't seen you in a long time, Bernie.
I haven't seen you. You've gained a few years. So have I.
No, I'm gaining on you. I'm catching up. One thing I wanted to talk about Liam for a second, and Jesse too, because they keep reminding me that I'm always focusing on solving problems. We got so many problems to solve, including our own and so on. And they say, wait a minute, maybe it's not problems, they're challenges. And some are more challenging than others. Certainly poverty is a problem, but there's a lot of things that we encounter every day that are not really problems. They're challenges. So don't put yourself down saying, I can't solve this, I can't solve that. It's not a question of being able to solve these drastic problems all at once. So just have to overcome smaller challenges at a time.
my approach is I sort of just ask myself, is this thing that I'm about to do going to move me closer to my objectives or further away from my objectives? And so if if it goes great, then great. And if it goes badly, then it still moves me closer to my objective in the sense that I learned something. And so
Yes,
that takes
exactly.
the
Yeah.
sting of the failure out, because even, even to try it and have it fail, that's fine. That's sort of what Carol Dweck talks about in the growth mindset,
Right.
right? And is that notion that, um, we don't have to be afraid of being exposed as frauds or something like that. That's what people with a fixed mindset will be fearful of. They'll take on challenges that are much below what their capabilities are. And you never get to that peak that you guys are talking about of unlimited possibility if you're aiming too low because you're afraid of hearing no, or you're afraid of failing, or whatever the case might be. But if you have that growth mindset, then you're willing to do the things that are outside of your comfort zone, because of that question. Is it going to move you closer to what your objectives are, or is it going to move you further away? And the answer is pretty much always closer, right? Whenever you're expanding beyond your comfort zone.
Yeah, but even if you don't do well, doesn't mean that you should beat yourself up over it.
Absolutely.
It means that you can learn from that, and again, take development into your own hands, and have confidence that the next time will be better. And be, as Bernie points out, we're all scientists. You point that out in the book, that everyone is a scientist. Do you want to explain that a little bit, Bernie, about?
Yeah, I was going to jump in on
ahead.
that. I think we tend to worship people, the movers and shakers, the Nobel Prize winners, the people that are famous and wealthy and are in the newspapers and on TV and all that. And actually, we're all scientists without realizing it, because what is the scientific method? It's just problem solving. It's having an idea of a problem, and having the vision of the scientific method is great because it's very optimistic. If you have a problem, you can make progress on it. So if you see yourself as a scientist in everyday life, no different from any other scientist, of course you have a lot to learn, just as science is an infinite kind of learning process. And if you are seeing yourself that way, then you become an infinite learning process. So it's a very optimistic way of looking at yourself. And most of what we have in the book are things like that, ideas that help you to see yourself as really fantastic. I mean, billions of years of evolution have gone into your development. And so we develop crazy ideas like the IQ test. Oh, I've only got 130 or 120 or 150. That's going to limit me. But the IQ test really is not a measure of human capacity. It's a measure of ability. And so many things have worked ever since we are born to put us down or to limit how we see ourselves. So my notion here is going back to the vision, that vision of continuing development. And let me add one other thing here, because there's something very concrete that was demonstrated in Japan after World War II. And this was the idea of Kaizen, Kaizen, or continuous improvement. Now, most of your audience is not going to be old enough to remember that Japanese products were throwaways before World War II. I mean, shoddy kinds of things. We don't think of Japanese products that way. We don't think of Toyotas that way, or any of the electronic products. What happened to the Japanese? Well, they developed this idea of continuous improvement, Kaizen. That's what that word means. And there was a professor who helped them after World War II, Deming, D-E-M-I-N-G. He moved into Japan and he worked with Japanese industrialists. And it wasn't just a question of the management that he worked with workers as well. And the idea of continuous improvement worked. This is the best example of what we're trying here with our own group, is not just apply it to work productivity at work, but we've developed the idea of personal productivity. So that means productivity in everyday life, about all the things we want, our friendships, how close we want to be, how we deal with everyday issues that confront us, how we deal with our happiness, our experiences all over the place. So this is our idea of moving toward that vision, personal productivity.
Well, that fits really well with the message of my podcast too, which, you know, it's easiest to see the growth monetarily because you have the numbers to look at whether or not it's growing or not. So, you know, we can look at our investments and be pleased at the direction of it, but we could really do that exact same process with every aspect of our lives. We could compound the interest of how well we listen to our spouses. We could compound the interest of you know, how well we reach out to people who are in need of help, like you were mentioning earlier, you know, people who have fallen on hard times or who need our help or for whatever reason have become homeless. You know, there's a lasting impact in it, and you know, it radiates outward. You talked about metaphors. It radiates outward like the ripples on a pond. When we have an impact on somebody and you know, we're able to show them an act of kindness and help them to grow, then that makes them more able to do that for other people.
That's a fascinating idea. I had never thought of it that way. Compound interest. My gosh, that's interesting.
So you can take the people values, as you say, Bernie, and not just work values, and talk about compound interest in all of our human values. Yeah, that's very good. We got to develop that further. Thank you. Thanks, Jesse.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to mention Schumacher's 3 objectives of Buddhist economics as well. Just to kind of remind you guys, I don't know if you remember it off the top of your head or not, but it was to give a man a chance to utilize and develop his faculties, to enable him to overcome egocentredness through a common cause. And this last one is the one that we're pretty good at in our economy, which is to bring forth goods and services needed for a becoming existence. But those first 2 things, where, you know, we develop ourselves and where we find common cause, those can sometimes be lacking in our bureaucratic social arrangements, as you were talking about. It can be a bit stifling. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I'd like to say a little. Yeah, it's been actually, you know, it's been so many years since I've been a teacher. It's this is the first time. I mean, it's one thing to have a small group. It's another thing to do this. I've never done a podcast before. So I've lost the thread. I apologize.
No, I think you wanted to mention something about Schumacher. You know, small is beautiful.
Right.
In terms of economics.
Well, what I want to pick up on is one of the things that's different about what we're doing. We're not just another self-help group. What we're interested in are the big problems of the world. Basically, to give a couple of examples of quotes from the book that give the idea of where we're trying to head. It's not that we're uninterested in self-help. We sure are. And what we've tried to do is bring forward the the academic credentials that give clearer, better understanding, like the stuff from language that I mentioned in terms of dichotomy, gradation, metaphor. But beyond that, our real focus is there are very deep problems in the world that are not being solved. You know, think of the big ones like climate change, for example, or nuclear proliferation. So what do we say about what we can do with regard to that? And let me give a couple of quotes here to give the direction. Jane Addams, who was a philosopher and who started the discipline of social work, has a wonderful short quote. It is the following: "The cure for the ills of democracy is more democracy." And for us, more democracy means the individual developing self and not just conforming to the way things are, but moving ahead and developing tremendous capacities that lie dormant. Another quote is from John Dewey, that famous philosopher and educator. I don't have the exact quote before me, but his idea was that the primary task of every single organization, institution in society should be to help individuals fulfill their capacities to the greatest degree. That should be the number one task throughout society. Well, those are beautiful quotes. And if you look at what's happening in politics today, it's very far from those ideals. But there's every reason why we should shoot for those ideals. That's what democracy is all about. And if democracy is having trouble, and it isn't just that it's having trouble, there's more democracy in the world now than 50 years ago by far. So democracy is not failing, it's succeeding, but it needs that next step. And for me, the next step is nothing less than the development of the individual.
Yeah. And even if we can't come up with solutions like, oh my goodness, how are we going to solve this nuclear problem and terrorism, terrorists getting hold of nuclear weapons and so on. So even though we're not bright enough to figure that out, what would happen if everybody in the world all of a sudden developed 5% more than we are right now? I'm sure people together will be able to figure out solutions to problems like that. So you have to do both. You can't just say, well, I can't do the the large problems that's beyond me, but together we can develop ourselves to the point where we can actually come up with half decent solutions for these very pressing world problems. One of which is poverty. By the way, everything seems to be improving. I think Jesse pointed that out to me, that there is less crime for sure over the last 800 years. There's less poverty, there's no question, especially in the last 20 or 30 years, although that's been reversed with the pandemic. But still, there's almost 50% of the world who's living on $5.25 a day. To me, that's a huge social problem. That cannot lie still without us trying to address problems like that. So even though, yes, there's fewer people living on $1.25 a day, there's still a hell of a lot of people living on, half the world's population living on less than $5.25 a day. That's untenable.
Yeah, we live in an era of tremendous abundance, but the problem is that the problem isn't production. The problem is allocation, right? It's too much wealth concentrated in too few hands, and so that's certainly become an issue. Of course, technology and automation and many other things are both solutions and challenges to that. There was a quote in the book. This was from page 58, and I thought this was kind of cute. It said, to look a bit further at the problem of automation, a theologian asked a computer, "Is there a God?" The computer said it doesn't have enough information to answer the question. And so it needed more computing power. So you give it more computing power, and you come back and ask the question, "Is there a God?" And it says, "Yes, here I am."
Or yes, there is now.
Yeah, yes, there is now. Yeah.
We have to give credit to Tom. He insisted that the book should be full of stories. It should have a lot of humor. It should be broken up. If it's all a head trip, no one is going to want to read the whole thing. So that's his baby. He's got dozens and dozens of stories in the book.
Yeah, right. But the problem with the disparity between the wealth allocations to the rich and poor is that disparity is getting worse. The gap between the rich and poor is worse now than it's ever been, and that is going to lead to severe problems politically and socially if we don't solve that problem soon. And so that, I think, may be one of the worst problems that we're facing now. And so it's only getting worse, and the changes that we are making are not helping to make it better, but it's still continuing to get worse. So we really need to deal with that issue in a significant way if we're going to improve things for the world.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that that's among our most pressing issues. And so that's one of the things that I do try to talk a lot about, and try to find solutions to. What on an individual level do you think we could do to at least begin to put momentum in the right direction towards reduction of this inequality?
Well, I'm thinking I don't have a solution for that, but that's if we stay with that as a problem, that's really the way to go toward a solution. We'll come up with something. Now, what we're coming up with are several things. They're not solutions, but they're pointing in the right direction. The homelessness project is an example of a direction that it's an educational problem. See, what would really solve things would be, from my perspective, moving education in general away from the outward emphasis that it has. It's perfectly fine what we learn about the world, but we learn so little about ourselves and our own possibilities that this is so one-sided. It's ridiculous. Of course, how to change education, my, that is fantastic. How do we do that? But if we can demonstrate, for example, with the homeless, that people who are so down and out, they're addicted, they're hopeless, they have problems, all kinds of problems. If we can get them if we can get examples going of more and more homeless people who we teach them to gain confidence in themselves and to be able to develop. Wow. Then perhaps we can begin to change the whole educational system in the world, which it has to be more balanced in terms of, oh, okay, the outward stuff is fine, but what about our emotions? What about dealing with our fear, our shame, our hate, our guilt? They can do that. Education can do that. It's failing to do it. So that's one key institution that needs to be changed.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to build on that to say that we learn a lot about what to learn, but we don't necessarily spend a lot of time talking about how to learn. And so, students are sometimes, we throw them into the deep end of some advanced content sometimes. And, they think there's something wrong with them if they don't immediately absorb it, or if they, if it takes them a lot of time and effort. they think that there's something wrong with them without realizing that that is the pathway, that is the process, is that it doesn't come easily. None of these problems and challenges, none of them come easily, or else we would have already solved them. You don't know the material already, or else you wouldn't need the course, right? It takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort to do just about anything that's worthwhile. And so that process of learning, of effortful learning, I think we can talk about it. And some of us do try to talk about that in education, but it's not really part of the curriculum in a systematic way. Andy, go ahead. And I'm sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say, but yes, we do not teach people about their emotions, first of all. We think it's a waste of time. It's selfish to think about oneself. And I demonstrated this. I've had some students go out to the Palm Beach Gardens Mall here, which is like the cathedral of capitalism in our area. And I just happen to just stand there and do nothing. And pretty soon a guard comes along and escorts them out. You can't just stand there and do nothing. That's a waste of time. You're not buying anything and so on. So we have to teach people how to actually reflect on themselves. That's mindfulness. I think Liam is an expert on meditation and mindfulness. So those are some exercises that you can begin to actually just think about yourself. Think of your feeling. Listen to your heartbeat. Listen to your breathing, and just get in touch with yourself, because we don't do that, and we're not taught to do it. In fact, we're taught not to do it because it's a waste of time. And it's selfish, and it's not productive. Everybody says it's not productive, but it is, because you're developing yourself, personal production. So we have to insert that into the curriculum somehow.
Let me add to that, because we're talking so much in our group about development of self, but unless you're aware of yourself, you can't develop yourself. And our awareness is very outward oriented rather than inward outward. And there was an experiment. I had another student, Jack Levin, who did a doctoral dissertation at Boston University, just as Andy did. And the finding he made was fantastic in terms of the power of an outward orientation to lead to deep problems of aggression, like racism or sexism or ageism or ethnocentrism. That what happened was that Jack deliberately frustrated his introductory sociology students deeply by giving them a so-called aptitude test for graduate school, where he failed all of them miserably. So there was a frustration that we find in society in general. And so what the result was increased prejudice against the minority group by most of the students, except there was a minority of students who were different. They didn't look at, they weren't so outward oriented. For example, when they looked at their own grades, they compared their grades, not with other students, not with the class average, but with their own previous grades. They were more inward, outward oriented. And what happened was they did not increase their prejudice against this minority group when they were frustrated by failing that phony test. So this points to the very great importance of an inward outward orientation as the basis for personal development. What Andy was talking about just now, awareness of your body, awareness of yourself, meditating about yourself. We do so little of that, even people who meditate a lot, that the whole emphasis in society is outward, 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 outward. We're besieged by advertisements, buy this, do this, etc. So that's crucial, and that would help enormously.
Yeah, I love that point. That sounds like how entrepreneurs view the world, where it's using the outward as a measuring stick. The ones who succeed, at least, you could look at Jeff Bezos as an example. He likes to say that it's always day one. In other words, you always have to go in and expect to grow and expect to improve. And the outward only tells you whether you're on the right track or not, but it doesn't validate that, okay, you've made it. You use it as a measuring tool to give you objective feedback, because we can lie to ourselves and we can say, yeah, I'm making progress, and it doesn't show up anywhere, but I'm making progress. I'm doing better. But are you really, right? Because we can let ourselves off the hook. And so that's where the outer world, I think, is valuable and helpful, is it as a feedback mechanism to tell us, okay, this is the right path. You're doing the things that are going to get results and that are going to have impact. And that would work with philanthropy too. It's like, okay, we helped 100 families to stay in homes that had been homeless, and now through our efforts this year, we've been able to help 200 or something like that. That's an outward manifestation of what you're able to do, and so you can use that as a measuring stick. But otherwise, I think it's too easy to let ourselves off the hook and find some esoteric way to invent progress, I guess. At least I found that to be the case with me. Liam, you've been doing the human development group for a while, and you've been doing meditation. How do you approach that mindfulness and awareness?
Well, one thing I'm suspicious of is the idea that if you are developing yourself personally, that you are going to become wealthy. That's not necessarily what's going to happen. And often that can happen, though. But if you expect that to be a natural outgrowth, I think you might end up disappointed. What is wealth exactly? Is it the accumulation of money? Sometimes, yes. Not always. I think we should expand our definition of that, in regard to what personal success really is in regards to personal development.
That's what we call cultural capital, not just material capital, but cultural. Other values like love, companionship, respect, altruism, maybe helping others as well as helping yourself. So close personal relationships. If you're religious, closer relationship with God. So there are other ways of actually measuring this, but it's more difficult to actually measure cultural capital than it is to measure capital.
One of the things that results is power. So if you have power over the people that you're with, if you have power among the people that you're with, if you have influence, maybe that's what we want. So we don't need to make this into something spiritual or mindful or whatever.
No, it doesn't have to be spiritual.
Yeah, I certainly don't really like the idea of limiting it down just to money.
Right.
No, but and money is just one outward manifestation, but there could be many others. It could be likes, it could be followers, it could be subscribers, and that can be a dopamine hit that becomes really addictive and becomes really self-defeating. And that's true of money, that's true of any of those outward measures. But what I'm saying in defense of those things, though, as being they can never validate you as, okay, now you're good enough. Now you have X number of likes and now you're good enough. No, that's the wrong way to approach it. It's more of like, if you are, let's take real estate, for example. If you're, because I just became a realtor recently. And so I know this firsthand, that it's very easy to let myself off the hook and not do the things that are going to generate business. And so if you're out there to help families and get them into the kind of homes that they want, and you know, there's certainly a value in having someone that you can go to and seek help on this. And so I know I was a lot more comfortable going with my realtor and getting their advice and getting their help with all of that process. And so, you know, I would love to provide that to other people, but it's very easy for me not to do the things that are going to help me to generate the business to be able to do that for other people, because I don't like to do the prospecting. I don't like to do the networking and the sales and all of those other things that go along with it, the advertising. There's a whole host of things that you have to do in order to generate the business. And so the actual helping people part of it, I might enjoy, but all of the things that are necessary aspects to produce that, I might not enjoy. So the difference between, you know, selling 2 or 3 houses a year or selling 20 or 30 houses a year, you know, that's the matter of, it's not that big of a difference between what you would be doing, but holding yourself accountable is one of the necessary things. And so if you're producing at, you know, that 2 or 3 house level, you really have to look at that as the output, as that's the product of what my efforts are doing. Do I like that, or do I want to adjust what I'm doing? So using it as a output mechanism is what I'm talking about here. Go, Liam, it looks like you have some thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, it sounds like productivity. So like, in other words, the emphasis on productivity and getting more out of yourself, getting more bang for your effort, and that sort of stuff, right? I think that's all totally valid and worthwhile to pursue. But what kind of bang do you want? Exactly. I think sometimes we get fixated on what we think the bang actually is.
Well, I
So
think
if
the
you-
bang actually, oh, I'm sorry. I think the bang is that we're looking for the validation from other people. And that actually retards your development. You have to learn how to be able to reward yourself. You have to learn how to pat yourself on the back, and not depend so much on everybody else patting you on the back. That's more inner oriented rather than outward oriented.
the power over your own happiness, really. I mean, that's the wealth, isn't it? And if you get fixated on what that happiness should look like, then it becomes a problem. In other words, if you get literal about what it should look like, it's gonna manifest in my life in this particular way. You know that.
Well, everyone's different, you know, Liam. So I mean, that's our approach. Very different.
Well, no, we have to be careful about that. In other words, if we say that whatever you imagine for yourself to be happiness, that's correct for you. No, that's probably totally screwed up. You know, like in other words, you don't really know what's going to make you happy in many cases. So, but the end all and be all is that once again, your power, if you have any, is going to be to manifest that sort of I don't know, happiness situation for yourself. I don't like that idea. Like maybe a sublime life would be more of an accurate, you know, presentation of what it means to have a life that's really worth living. You know, a happy life or a pleasant life or a pretty life. No, a sublime life. Yeah.
Maybe a
And-
complete life, possibly.
Right, something like that. Like, and would it have a lot of money in it? I hope so. I don't think so necessarily, but in many cases, yes. If you're really resonating properly with everybody around you and society and nature, there's going to be some prosperity going on.
I've been thinking as you've been talking about a course that I taught at Strayer. It was called Finite Math, and it was a very difficult course because the last half we had various kinds of problems we had to deal with. And I looked at the solutions given by the authors, and I was shocked to see that the solution the author came up with for each problem was totally different and unique, almost having nothing to do with one another. And I asked myself, well, how are you going to learn anything from this if there's no stable approach? It happens to be how the author thought about the problem and gave that solution. And you can't learn that way. I mean, in the basic math, there's a methodology. You learn the methodology and you can do problem after problem after problem because the methodologies are in the same framework. But in this case, every methodological solution was totally unique. And I had a very hard time figuring out how the author came up with the way he solved each problem because they were totally different. So if you have a situation like that, how does one learn really when there's nothing that you can hold on to that's unique and you don't even know whether the solutions that the author gave were the correct solutions, for example? And that's where solving problems is more realistic because the world is more like that. And that goes along with what Liam has been talking about in a certain way. Because we really don't know. If we knew, for example, exactly how to solve the problem, we would feel comfortable solving it. We say, oh, all you have to do is this and that and that. But in most cases, it's not so simple. And if we're having difficulty making it work because the solution is not so apparent, then it becomes unpleasant, and we really don't want to do that. We don't like to do that because we don't know if we're doing it right, if we don't know what the real solution is. If we could look at the problem and say, oh, I see, this is exactly how you do it, and it will work, and it does every time, it'd be a snap, and you'd be very happy doing it because you knew you could, and you knew you could get it right. The problem is very often we really don't know whether we're doing it the right way or doing the right thing.
Well, it's the nature of the problem. In other words, so when you define your life in terms of problems, that's the problem. If your life is a bunch of problems to solve, where have you gone astray? It's not really what it's about.
In a certain sense, it is. For example, what Jesse was talking about, all the things you have to do, those are problems. How do we promote? How do we do this? How do we do that? It's not always easy, and we're not always sure that our efforts are going to be successful.
Yeah,
Well,
I know.
So
to me, it comes down to a sort of non-literal awareness. In other words, like if you decide this is going to be my problem I'm going to solve, but I'm not going to take it literally. This is not the problem of life. This is just the one that I'm going to deal with right now. I don't know what the answer is, but I'm going to be working on this, and I'm going to get better at solving this problem.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. But the life is more complex than just one problem to solve, because almost every day is fraught with problems that living creates for us.
Yes.
And we're not always good at solving the problems, finding the answers, because it's not all easy.
We are problem creating organisms. Okay, so you've got to realize that. In other words, if you turn off the problem generator, life becomes something quite different. Okay, to perceive your life as a minefield of problems, that in itself is a fun house of horror. You know what I mean?
This is where I think the eclectic mix is so valuable, because I totally agree with you that all of the problems that I think about and that I talk about, these are all self-generated. All of these things creation is a self-generated problem, right? The act of creation itself. So I agree with you. And sometimes I need that reminder of what you're talking about, to step away from it and just breathe and just be in nature and just go for a jog and just let go of all of thing.
Yeah, and to be thankful for your supposed problems. You know, in other words, like, oh, these things are like
Yeah, the
manifesting.
Sure, absolutely.
They present themselves as problems to me, and then it's okay. This is going to be fun. Let's deal with this. But don't take it so seriously. I'm not saying it's a game. That's a big problem with big business right there. Oh, it's just a game, nothing personal, right? Just business, right? Um, but at the same time, to be so besieged all the time, that is really interesting, isn't it? That we walk around besieged by this and by that.
If I
and that
can
we,
jump in for just a moment here,
yeah,
I'd like to contrast business with education in this way, that in general, in business, among the many ways of measuring success, there is the one that is emphasized, the bottom line. Okay, that's a clear, specific measure, market share, that sort of thing. Fine. Now, education, we don't have such a clear measurement. And the problem there is that education also has been outward oriented rather than inward outward. The notion that I'm going for is that the individual has to develop the trust of self to be able to develop his or her own assessment of personal worth, development, progress, what have you. Whether it's money or whatever, it could be anything, but it has to be an individual thing. And because of our outward oriented nature, not nature, it's rather what we've learned culturally, we don't develop that confidence in our own self-assessment. This is what Andy was talking about in terms of reinforcing yourself, rewarding yourself. If we could learn to do that and have confidence in our own self-assessment of what so many goals that people have in life, what I'm thinking of as a way of concretizing this somewhat, because these are vague ideas, is the contrast between two metaphors. The metaphor of a seesaw and a stairway. Now, so much of life is, you think of sports, the winners and losers. You're up, they're down. You're down, they're up. We're on a seesaw in so much of life. We're taught that that's what life is all about. It's a struggle against others. And it's based on scarcity. Now, what we're into as a group is getting away from scarcity if the individual does indeed have tremendous potential for development. So if we want a stairway with infinite steps, a stairway big enough for the whole human race, where we can climb and help others to climb, they can teach us when we fall down a little bit how to climb better. That's the kind of metaphor that I like. And I think we are on that, could be on that infinite stairway. It depends on us moving out of our bureaucratic, outward-oriented way of life and having a vision of a more democratic way of life that emphasizes personal development.
Bernie, I love those metaphors. What you're talking about with the seesaw and the stairwell reminds me of game theory. We have the concept of a zero-sum game. And I love zero-sum games. Like, for example, chess is an example, football. These are zero-sum games where you have one side against another side. There's going to be a winner or a loser. Those are fun to play. But I like to think of those games as a part of climbing up the stairwell if they're played properly, in the sense that I sit down and I play a game of chess with somebody and we both enjoy the game and we want to play it again. And it doesn't matter who wins or loses in the grand scheme of things. The point is that we're enjoying the game itself and we're both improving as we enjoy this game. And so if the games are played in a cutthroat way where we're going to prioritize this sub game, this zero-sum game where I win and you lose, and that's how I'm going to play the game. That's what the problem is. That's what our business landscape looks like a little bit too much right now. And if we instead played it as, I want the best player to win, and I want the problem to be solved well, we kind of looked at it that way, then we just see it more as rounds rather than as a finalized, if it's just an infinite number of games that are going to be played, then we don't put so much emphasis on any one particular game. We put emphasis on the community of gamers instead.
Yeah.
And
It's on the journey too.
Yeah, on the journey.
It's the journey rather than the end.
Well, and the victory becomes really your ability to play the part of the loser or the winner very well. And if you end up losing, that you can do that really well too.
Graceful winning, graceful losing. Yes.
That is your victory, and of course, then if that's your objective, you can't lose. You always win.
That's the hack to the game, Liam. That's the hack.
Yeah.
There's a line from Alice in Wonderland. Everyone has won, and all must have prizes. It's I forget who said that in Alice in Wonderland, but that is a line from there.
Well, if you think about the villains in the films, and they do it so well when they're defeated, they're just so destroyed in front of your eyes, and it's like, wow. I wish I could do that. I wish I could break down like that. I wish I could be totally destroyed like that. But somehow I'm addicted to winning all the time, which is, oh, well, I guess I'll learn eventually.
But I mean, the central problem of our time is basically how to develop, the human race and how to develop each other.
I don't know if Trump is ever going to learn that.
No. That's why America cannot become great again, or great at all under Trump's rule. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a narcissist, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I don't feel like he lost very gracefully. So that
he hasn't lost at all, don't you know?
Right. Yeah, and he certainly didn't win gracefully either.
No,
So
not at all.
Yeah.
By the way, I put out our websites up on the chat for anybody who might be interested in learning more about the consulting group, WorldVision Solutions, or about a book.
Now, I'm going to have to sign off, but our website is info@worldvisionsolutions.org.
Sorry, Bernie, I mistyped. It's info. What'd you say?
info@worldvisionsolutions.org. And that will take you immediately to our book website, which is
there it is.
theamazingself.com. Okay, I'm going to have to sign off, folks, but I've enjoyed this immensely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, Bernie. I've enjoyed this.
For hosting us. Maybe we can come back again and
Bernie,
go into something more detailed. Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
no, I was just thanking Bernie for coming and participating so well. That was great.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed this conversation. Goodbye, Bernie.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Jeff.
All right, so I think we probably should all wrap it up. Anybody who stayed with us this long, it was probably just so that they could hear where they can find out more about you and where they can get the book.
Yeah,
so I'll make sure.
I put it up on the chat. I hope people can see it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the description. So if you want to get the book, you can order it at that website. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
All right, perfect. And what kind of consulting generally would be ideal for someone who's coming to?
I think to start with would be individuals, like people who want to start their own businesses. That's probably the best way to start.
All right, so business coaching. If you are interested in being an entrepreneur, then you can go to WorldVision Solutions and reach out to these guys, and they'll walk you through the process.
Yeah, and feel free to leave comments on the website. We have dialogue that we're very interested in dialoguing with people who want to leave comments to us.
All right. Thank you guys so much for being
Well,
on
thank
here.
you.
It's been a
Appreciate it.
pleasure. You guys are gentlemen and scholars.
Hope to see you again.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye now.